The wind was blowing cold as Evelyn Winters parked her blue sedan at the entrance of the small roadside hotel. The sign lights flickered frantically, as if trying to attract travellers lost in the darkness. Pine Grove Inn, announced the worn-out sign, with 2 missing letters that gave the place an even more abandoned look. Evelyn turned off the engine and lingered for a few moments inside the car, watching the raindrops begin to dot the windshield. She wanted to cry, but it seemed as if she had dried up inside. Her face in the rearview mirror showed deep, dark circles and a pallor she didn't recognize. At 42, she felt as if she had aged a decade in just 1 month. 24 hours earlier, she had signed the divorce papers, officially ending 15 years of marriage with Daniel. The same Daniel who called her "my little star" in the early years, the same who vowed they would grow old together in a house with a porch facing the sea. Now there were only documents, stamps, and the ring she had thrown in the glove compartment as soon as she left the lawyer's office. She picked up the phone and looked at the message she'd just sent to her mother. "I need to be alone for a bit, just for a few days to organize my thoughts." The response came almost immediately. "Take care, my dear. I'll be here when you need." The simplicity of those words brought a lump to her throat. Her mother, Clara, always so present, even when Evelyn built walls around herself. The original plan was to spend a few days at her mother's house, in the small coastal town where she grew up. But just 2 hours from the destination, something inside her changed. She wasn't ready for explanations, for the understanding look from her mother, who, despite never saying it out loud, always thought Daniel wasn't the right man for her. She wasn't ready to hear "I told you so" in silent whispers. When she saw the hotel sign, she decided impulsively. She veered off the route like escaping a fire, not looking back, carrying only a small suitcase and a heart in ruins. The road seemed endless, as if the destination was in no hurry to take her anywhere. Everything in her ached, but it was a kind of dull, bitter pain, like the longing for something still close, but no longer touchable. The Pine Grove Inn seemed to have been forgotten by time. The dark wooden structure and dusty windows resembled an abandoned memory. The garden, which must have once been beautiful, now displayed only withered bushes and a small fountain without water. There were only 2 other cars parked, one of them visibly broken. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn grabbed her suitcase from the back seat and walked to the entrance. The bell rang as she opened the door, announcing her arrival into the emptiness of the lobby. An old wooden counter occupied a corner, and behind it, a middle-aged woman rose. The receptionist seemed almost like an apparition, with grey hair tied in a loose bun and thin framed glasses sliding down her thin nose. She wore a faded green sweater, and her hands, when they moved, resembled dry leaves in the wind, fragile yet curiously resilient. "Good evening," said Evelyn, placing the suitcase on the floor. "Do you have rooms available?" The woman observed her for a moment, as if reading something written on her face. Her eyes, Evelyn noticed, were a deep blue, almost indigo, and seemed to know more than they should. "Yes, we do," she replied, opening an old registry book. "How long do you plan to stay with us?" I'm not sure. Maybe a few days. Can I pay daily?" The woman nodded while filling out the form with elegant handwriting. Evelyn provided her details, noticing how her hands worked with precision despite their apparent fragility. "My name is Margaret," said the receptionist without Evelyn asking. "If you need anything, I'll be around. The hotel isn't big, but it has its charm." Evelyn tried to smile, but the gesture didn't reach her eyes. Margaret held out the key, a real metal key with a wooden tag engraved with the number 17. When their fingers touched during the exchange, the receptionist held her hand a second longer than natural, and in a low voice, almost a whisper, said, "I was waiting for you." Evelyn froze for a second. That phrase. It was exactly what Daniel used to say every morning during the early years of their marriage, as he set the breakfast table and she came out of the bedroom still sleepy. "I was waiting for you," he would say with a smile, and it made the world seem lighter. Over time, they stopped seeing each other in the morning, Each left earlier, in more of a hurry, more distance. A shiver ran down her spine. How could that stranger know something so intimate? Or was it just a cruel coincidence? You... What? Evelyn asked, feeling her mouth dry. Margaret smiled, a serene smile that contrasted with the unease her words had caused. We have few guests this time of year. It's nice to have a new presence around here. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something in the receptionist's tone suggested a deeper meaning. Evelyn just took the key and thanked her, not knowing what to say. She walked down the dimly lit corridor, the old carpet muffling her footsteps. On the walls, paintings of unknown landscapes and faded portraits watched her as she passed. Room 17 was at the end of the corridor, with a view of the back of the hotel, where a small grove of pine trees stood against the night sky. When she opened the door, she was greeted by a space that, despite its simplicity, had a welcoming atmosphere. A double bed with a floral bedspread, a reading chair by the window, a small desk, and an antique wardrobe made up the furnishings. The bathroom, although small, was impeccably clean. There was a subtle scent of lavender in the air, mixed with the smell of old wood. Evelyn threw herself onto the bed with the weight of someone who carries years of silence. She closed her eyes and, for the first time since the divorce hearing, allowed herself to cry. The tears were not silent, but deep sobs that shook her entire body, as if expelling a long-contained pain. She cried for the lost marriage, for the wasted time, for the 1,000 little deaths that preceded the final end. She cried for the wedding photo album she had left behind, for the house that now belonged solely to Daniel, for the family they never formed because it was never the right time. She cried until she fell asleep, still dressed, on the bedspread that smelled of lavender, yet there wasn't enough comfort to mute the turmoil inside her. In the first few days, Evelyn barely left her room. She ordered simple meals that were left on a tray at her door and spent hours watching the rain through the window. Thoughts came like waves, some light, others violent. She remembered advice she received when she was still married. You need to stand up for yourself more. Men are all the same. Marry if you want, endure if you have to. And after the divorce, it was the best thing you did. You will be reborn. Now, it's a new life. Some pieces of advice were good, others sounded empty. All came from outside. And she there, in that ancient and comforting silence, felt she needed to listen to herself. On her 5th day at the hotel, she woke up determined not to stay locked in any longer. She dressed carefully, not to impress, but as a small act of self-love. In the bathroom mirror, she faced her reflection and recognized the sadness in her eyes, but also a spark of something that might have been courage. As she went down for breakfast, she found the small dining room almost empty. Only an elderly couple occupied a table in the corner, and Margaret was behind the counter arranging cups. When she saw Evelyn, her face lit up with a smile that seemed genuinely happy. "Good morning," greeted the receptionist. "It's good to see you. I was starting to worry." Evelyn sat at a table by the window, from where she could see the garden and the pine trees in the background, now bathed in the soft morning light. Margaret brought coffee and a basket of still warm bread. "Do you make them yourself?" asked Evelyn, biting into a roll that melted in her mouth. "Yes. I wake up early to bake. I believe that small pleasures make all the difference." There was something so genuine about that woman that Evelyn found herself sharing more than she had planned. "I just got divorced," she said softly, as if testing the words. "Yesterday marked 4 days." Margaret nodded, showing no surprise. "Endings are often also beginnings," she replied, sitting down in the chair opposite Evelyn, "though we rarely managed to see it at the time." "How did you know?" Evelyn asked suddenly. "On the first day you said you were expecting me." An enigmatic smile crossed the receptionist's lips. "This hotel has a certain ability to attract people at times of transition. I just recognized the signs." Before Evelyn could ask more questions, Margaret stood up. There is a path through the forest, if you want to take a walk. It's not very long, but it's beautiful. It ends at a small lake. Take the lunchbox if you go. I made extra sandwiches. During the walk, the fresh forest air seemed to clear something inside Evelyn. The path was narrow, but well marked, winding through tall pine trees. The smell of moss and damp earth brought back childhood memories of when she played in the woods near her grandparents' house. That's when the flashbacks began. Vivid images, full of small but important details. She found herself remembering how she used to write love notes and leave them on Daniel's pillow. He always smiled when he found them. Then she stopped. She thought it didn't make sense anymore, or that he didn't notice. But soon after, the long silences came. She also remembered how she used to hug him from behind while he was cooking. It was a silly, simple gesture, but it had affection, it had presence. And then, she stopped doing it. She replaced the hugs with cold looks, with short phrases, and soon the fights over small things began. He remembered the times he stayed up waiting for her to come back late from work. At first she would say, "Thank you for waiting for me." Later, she wouldn't even look. They began sleeping at different times. The bed became too big. When she reached the lake, Evelyn sat down on a fallen log and observed the tranquil surface of the water. A small wooden pier extended a few meters out, where ducks swam carefreely. She opened the lunchbox and found, besides the sandwiches, a small note. Sometimes we need to lose something to understand its true value. Other times we need to lose to move on. Wisdom is in knowing the difference. Margaret. As the days passed, the silence of the hotel turned into a mirror. Evelyn began to see, with painful clarity, the small attitudes that undermined their marriage over the years. It wasn't a great betrayal. It wasn't an unforgivable mistake. It was the forgetting of the touch of the hand when passing through the hallway. It was the coffee left unmade for the other in the rushed mornings. It was the "How was your day?" that stopped being asked. It was the birthdays remembered at the last minute, the hurried hugs, the messages answered coldly. It was the silent decision to stop complimenting, to stop surprising, to stop trying. She realized that both had settled into a dangerous place, that of indifference disguised as routine, each waiting for the other to take the first step, as if loving were a game of pride. And so, they stopped fighting for what they had built. One day of neglect turned into weeks. Without noticing, they began planting distances where there used to be bridges. In the solitude of the hotel, Evelyn understood that love does not survive on autopilot, that marriage is a daily choice, not only of being together, but of making the other happy. And if both have this same mindset, if they fight to care for each other with intention and affection, everything becomes lighter. Harmony doesn't come from the absence of flaws, but from the willingness to nurture love even on difficult days. One morning, upon returning from her daily walk, Evelyn found an old mirror leaning against the hallway wall. She didn't remember having seen it before. She stopped and looked at herself. She didn't see the betrayed or hurt woman she expected to find. She saw someone who still loved, who still wanted to fight. She saw cowardice disguised as dignity, and cried as she hadn't in years. Not for him, but for herself, for having given up without having tried everything. That night she went down to the lobby and found Margaret reading an old book behind the counter. Upon seeing her, the receptionist smiled, as if she already knew what Evelyn was about to say. "I think I'm leaving tomorrow," said Evelyn, sitting in a nearby armchair. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Margaret asked, closing the book. "I found what I was avoiding," Evelyn replied with a sigh. "I realised that part of me still loves Daniel, and that maybe we gave up too soon." Margaret nodded, unsurprised. "True love is not a straight line, Evelyn. It's a maze. Sometimes we get lost, sometimes we return to the beginning. The important thing is to never stop searching for the way." "I don't know if he will listen to me. Maybe it's too late." "What does your heart say?" Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. that I need to try, that I need to at least speak the truth, even if it's just to move on. Margaret smiled, getting up to retrieve something from a drawer. She returned with a small leather-bound journal. The guests of Pine Grove have a habit of leaving a message before they depart. A reflection, a wish, a discovery. I would like you to write something when you're ready. Evelyn made a decision. She couldn't change the past, but she could do something in the present. There were no guarantees, but there was willingness. The next morning, after paying her bill, she left the hotel with steady steps, drove back, crossed familiar streets with a racing heart. She stopped in front of the house that was once hers. The lights were on. Daniel was there. She didn't knock in anger. She rang the doorbell with trembling hands. When he opened the door, their eyes met, and time seemed to stop. Daniel was thinner, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes that betrayed sleepless nights. They didn't say anything immediately. It wasn't necessary. She asked to come in. He made room, and there, in the living room that had been the stage for so many arguments, they sat in silence. Evelyn didn't come to apologize for everything. She came to apologize for what she kept silent, for the times she withdrew out of fear, for the words she held back, and she told him that she still loved him, that if he still felt the same, they could try again. He listened to her, not hurriedly but carefully, and in the end he held her hand. They promised nothing. They didn't vow eternal love. They simply agreed to start anew, with less pride, more listening, less fear, more presence. A week later, Evelyn returned to Pine Grove to retrieve the suitcase she had left behind. Margaret was in the garden, watering the shrubs that now seemed more alive. Upon seeing her, she smiled like someone who knew what would happen from the beginning. "You look different," observed the receptionist. "I feel different, lighter, more present." Margaret nodded. "Room 17 will always be available if you need a refuge." Before leaving, Evelyn wrote in the diary that Margaret had given her. "Pride almost separated us forever, but love, when it is true, always knows the way back. And when we decide to fight to make the other person happy, and that person does the same, then we find the true essence of love." As she left the hotel, she looked one last time at the old wooden building. In the lobby window, she saw Margaret waving. For a moment it seemed like she glowed softly, as if illuminated from within. Evelyn blinked, and the image returned to normal. She smiled, got into the car, and drove off. Not to the old house, but to the home they were rebuilding together, brick by brick, with hands finally unarmed. The key to room 17 remained in her bag, as a silent reminder that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find our way back. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.